Hi everyone, Adam Steele here, and today we're checking out this new thing from HRK. This is the 500 Series CS566, and it aims to give you a very similar vibe to an all-in-one SSL-style channel strip with a lot less cost involved. Let's check it out. Now, full disclosure at the start of the video, this is technically a sponsored video. HRK have sent me these over to review and to talk about, and the deal is if I make an instructional video, not this video but a separate one, for their website of how to use these, then I get to keep them. So that's the deal. So I am slightly biased, so I can't really as a review say that these are great or not great. I like them, but whether you do or not is entirely up to you. SSL, a British company, well technically no longer British, were a company that made headway in the early 1980s with their 4000 series mixing desks. Arguably the first desks in the world to provide compression and dynamic sections and all that kind of stuff on every channel, so you didn't need a whole ton of outboard. They also had a certain sound to them that was a lot cleaner than previous generations of desks, but still had a character and a kind of a crunch to it. And so HRK have gone some way to replicating that kind of idea here. The 566 channel strip, I say channel strip, it's not got a microphone preamp. Probably through conversations with engineers like me, it's generally kind of accepted, I think, that a lot of the time a lot of engineers would prefer to track either through super clean preamps or something like a Neve or an API style preamp with a kind of a warmth, and then later they would want to process something in a line level with something with an SSL style, because the preamps in SSL stuff are not really massively characterful compared to other brands as previously mentioned. However, the channel strip does have a lot of character of its own. It's got the VCA style compressor, which is very SSL-like, with a few more controls than you might have got on the original, including a sidechain high-pass filter, which is really useful for a lot of modern mixing, where we have a lot more low-end often than we might have done in the early 80s. Then there's a drive section, which of course isn't on an original SSL channel strip, but what I think you would have done with an original channel strip is driven the inputs until they got that amount of drive, and then had to really pull back the faders, which you can do with this. The red knobs at the top and the bottom are in and out pad trim levels, whatever you want to call them. I've got, especially on the left one, which is what I'm going to be doing the plugin doctor analysis-y stuff with, I've got that coming in kind of a lot lower than Unity, because the Arturia unit that I'm using for the output behind me is really quite hot on the outputs, and going through here, this can handle it, but then the output going to the converters on the Audient ASP880 were clipping on the way back in. Not the fault of these at all, definitely the way that my system is set up. The output being plus 24 dB calibrated and the input being plus 18. There's a 6 dB discrepancy, so if I did a loopback, they would clip even without connecting this at all. Not their fault, so not worth worrying about. Below that, we have their EQ, which is a... how many band EQ? I'm an idiot and I'm just checking. It's a 4-band EQ, much like the classic SSL, but where they've got their kind of, black and brown or whatever you'll hear subtle differences in EQs. HRK have called this the blue EQ. It is the colour blue, and apparently it aims to roughly replicate the style of an SSL EQ. And then at the bottom, next to the output knob, is transformer, which isn't a big fat iron transformer. HRK have their own kind of active transformer style thing, which provides a lot of the kind of the sound of what transformers do, with a big kind of uplift and a bit of a low end kind of lift, a bit of a smiley curve, if you will, without having to have a big expensive unit that would just add to the cost, depending on what you would do, especially on line level gear. Mic level gear, I personally find that the transformer, especially the input transformer, can really make a sonic difference, and the output transformer can make a sonic difference if you're really smashing it, but on line level gear, not so much. Remember that traditionally transformers were not used for their sonic benefits. They were used for electrical isolation in the days where the goal was to keep the noise floor down. And I mean, guys like Rupert Neve in interviews has famously said that the only reason he was still using transformers in the 80s and even in the 70s was because that was the best way that he knew how to keep signals clean and keep noise floors down. Any sonic benefits that we've had from that have always been kind of a secondary benefit. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up a copy of Plugin Doctor and we're going to look at a few things on the scopes, and then we are going to do an audio demonstration with some of this stuff to see what we can get from it. Right, so as you can see on the screen now, we're going through one of these. I'm just using one because for showing you on scopes, they're not stereo matched, although the compressors can be stereo linked internally. But what that means is there's no point in me dialing the knobs twice to show you the same thing. So you can see that the line is pretty much straight. Going down below 20 Hz, that might be the converters that are doing that. In fact, let's test that. So with nothing plugged in, this cable in my hands is going straight from the Arturia, straight back through to the Audient. And so this is the graph we get. And now if I plug it back in to the SSL, which is on and powered, there we are. With everything pretty much at unity for the in and the out, it looks essentially like a straight wire. That's great for us. That means that anything that this unit does is very much on purpose. Like the transformer button. If I hit the transformer button, oh look, suddenly we've got a big kind of 10 to 20 Hertz bump, and kind of, even though 10 to 20 Hertz is kind of useless to us in a mix, that little slope going up to it might do something in terms of some super kind of low stuff. And more importantly, I think you can see, even though there's a tiny dip on the regular level, I'll bring the input up a touch. And you can see that from 5K, we do start to get a big kind of smiley lift. I say big, by the time it hits 20K, it's only a 2 decibel boost. But if this is being strapped across a mix bus, that might be the nice kind of super sheen on the top that you were looking for. Interestingly, unlike kind of traditional metal transformers, if I put this on impulse response mode to see if there's any transformer ringing, there isn't any. And if I put it on harmonic analysis and turn off the transformer, no change there either. And I did find that by driving the input harder and kind of backing off the output, that still didn't give any appreciable change. If I pushed it really hard, I started to see my converters starting to kind of bring their own characteristic in before this does. Now, transformer off for a second. Let's turn the EQ on, which, as you can see, has some slight controls, which are doing exactly as described. Unlike a classic SSL EQ though, which does have variable frequencies, this does have fixed frequency spots, which does limit it a little bit. We can see that the low is a shelf and that the button changes where it affects. Low mid has a frequency shift, as does the high mid. And the high, which you can see a little spike on the top there, but that's my converters, that's not the EQ itself. If I turn the output down, you'll see that will start to go away. There we go. If we're not clipping the converters, you can see it's much smoother at the top now. And that also has a switch to make it more drastic in the high mids or not. Does the drive affect EQ? Perceptibly, it looks like the drive function doesn't really change the overall EQ. It does just add more harmonics, as we'll see here. So this is the harmonic analysis going through this with everything turned off. We can see there's a 1K test tone. And the biggest harmonic going through is below 100 decibels, which is arguably imperceptible. So when I turn on the drive, roughly the same until I start to turn up this knob. And suddenly all those harmonics come out to play. And I can get more and more and more. And the compressor, it's not really worth showing on scopes. I'm just going to have to do that with audio because it sounds how it sounds. It's a VCA compressor and it's a very useful one. So without further ado, let's open up a project and try some sources. Alright, here we are, and with a track that is set behind me. Alright, so the first example I've got in this mad track, which I'll play you a little bit of. This is one of the Mike Mallion tracks. It's got loads of drums. Lots of everything going on. It's kind of crazy. So I'm starting with one of the synth parts, which with nothing on sounds like this. And with our SSL unit on here. I've scooped out some low end, I've given it quite a lot of drive, and it fits in the mix much better. Without that, it's a little bit woolly. And now it sits in the mix where it should. I might even bring the volume up a little to compensate. I'm having to do this backwards because I'm using a monitor over there to see what you can see. And so the combination of the transformers, the EQ, the drive, and the compression means that everything is kind of cleaned out in the low mid-range, but without kind of losing all its energy. So now it's got a much better space in the mix. And because the drive kind of gives more saturation on the high end, it's still in the mix without being overbearing. And so magic is happening. Let's try it on the bass. So this was with a plugin before. This is how it sounded without the plugin. Very fuzzy, but no definition. Here's with the plugin. And now let's swap that out for the hardware. And now let's tune this because this is before double tap, which is kind of my dual band compressor that I use. So now there's a significant kind of high push on there, and the drive and the light compression, because I backed off everything on the compressor there, is really helping it sit. And without the transformer, it kind of isn't as good. So let's try that in the mix now. And now let's try the real test, the master bus. Now this is going to be interesting to see what we can get from this. I'm going to try and zero out everything first. Now I've got everything roughly zeroed out. I'm going to turn off the drive too. The drive might be a bit of a secret weapon here, but let's find out. The compressors are on, but on a master bus, I don't currently have a single band kind of master bus glue compressor going on. And I can play with the recovery time to make that work. And because this has the 150 hertz cut out of the sidechain on the compressors, that means it's much more usable on a master bus. So let's try this now. And so I'm finding that when I turn this on with everything pretty much all guns blazing, tiny little bits of EQ bumps, but level matched on the way output to make sure it's the same level coming out of this. So we're not hearing any volume increase perceptual, because louder is more good without context. That's a human flaw. So that's why you kept seeing me adjust the output volumes to make sure the levels, even though they look like they're going out and coming in louder, there is a 6 dB discrepancy because my converters, the Arturias, are 6 dB hotter than the input. So as long as it's exactly 6 dB discrepancy, we're going to hear that as the same. We're not going to hear that 6 dB change because of the way that the converters are at different levels, and I'm matching that. So as I would bypass those and engage those as a straight wire, they would sound identical. It's worth noting. But yeah, with everything on, all guns blazing, I didn't have the compressors stereo linked, but then the stereo image is quite stable on this track. But if it wasn't, there is a stereo link functionality where I can add a wire internally and stereo link the two compressors. If that's something you need to do, if you're going to use this on stereo buses a lot, you can do that. Actually, there are 2 pins on each of these. So if I had 6 of these, 8 of these, I could link all of the compression detectors. So if you've got something like a 5.1 output or an Atmos bus, you could theoretically at least have SSL style bus compression across every single channel of your however many you can connect in one unit of this. I have seen units with 11 500 series racks, so apart from the LFE channel, which you probably wouldn't want to do that on anyway, you could have every single speaker in an Atmos bed running with these all linked if that's what you want to do. Now let's talk price and features, because it looks, and I'm looking down here, like this is going up against basically the SSL-6 series channel strip, which does have a mic pre-input, but like I said, you're probably going to want to use another kind of pre, so that's not included in the HRK one. But then there is a high-pass filter, which again, on a mic pre, I always want. The EQ on the 6 series is a low and a high, no mids, where this is a 4-band. It's got a compressor that's a single knob, where this has recovery, attack control, and the high-pass filter on all that kind of stuff. This has optional drive, the transformer thing, and yeah, the full 4-band EQ. And the SSL series in the UK right now has gone down to £320, so same roughly in euros or dollars, and the HRK one is £272, so just a little less, but with a lot more features. Now, if this was comparing an SSL channel from the mid-80s with the full functionality, the expansion gate, the routing, all the big transforms, all that kind of stuff, they're worth a lot more because the heritage, the kind of all the extra stuff that comes with that, sure. But SSL now, it's all Chinese made. What's the company called? Audiotonics, is it? Yeah, Audiotonics. So it's all Chinese made stuff by Audiotonics under the SSL name, or you could go with something that's made in Europe by hand by people who I know and I like. So in my case, I would definitely go with this. Again, like I said at the start of the video, I am biased, but looking at it for what it is, the SSL stuff is less functional for what I want, because the mic pre's already have a whole host of stuff. But the processing at the mix stage is when I use SSL gear the most. And when I'm mixing, I obviously don't need mic pre's, I need line level stuff, so that's kind of pointless to me. The more functionality and the finer control is what really does it for me. Downsides to this unit, all the controls are really kind of crammed in because they have to be to make it all work in the 500 series space. Their super analog stuff is about this much taller. Yeah, you can barely see on camera, but there's an extra few inches there, and they do their dynamics separately to the whole EQ and everything on a separate. So that would be 2 of their super analog units wide, and so this really is cramming a lot in a smaller space. So if that's what you want and you're really in love with analog, which I'm going that way, then you could do worse than get one of these. Thanks to HRK for sending these over, and thanks for hopefully letting me keep them. Thanks to everyone on Patreon for supporting us to do videos like this and take the time out from the production schedule to do these kind of videos. Thanks to everybody at home for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.